This is Stephen Reed from the University of Southern California. Many times when you create a model in Libra, you would like different characteristics of the model to have different attributes. For example, maybe you want different layers to have different inhibition, you want different units within layers to have different activation functions, and maybe you want different connections to have different learning rates. The way you do this in Libra is you basically create child specs for each one of those things, and then what you do is you create unique specs for each of the things you want to be different. So I'll show you how to do that right now. So the first thing you want to do is, if you want to create different specs, what you do is you go in this window over here, the browser window that lists all the programs, and you scroll down where you see the network 2, it says specs, and then you'll notice it says specs for hidden layer, Libra unit spec 3 or something similar, Libra bias spec, projection spec, and Libra connection spec. Okay, now basically what we're going to do here is we're going to create child specs for each of them. Now you'll notice that these different specs have these arrows here, and in this case you click on hidden layer, you'll notice it already has a child called input output. Libra unit spec, it doesn't actually have a child, as you can see. Libra bias spec, we're not going to do anything with that today. The full projection spec, which basically is a spec that tells you how the network, the layers should be wired up. Are they fully connected, one-to-one, etc. And then you have the Libra connection spec, which also you'll see doesn't currently have a child. So the way to create a child is you click on a spec, and then you'll see a box in the middle, and you can either look at new child, or the other thing you can do is you can control click or right click, and you get this menu, and you say new child, and you're making a child. You're going to make a child of the layer spec right now, and the child type is Libra layer spec. You say OK. It now gives you a new layer spec, and you can change the name. In this case, we're going to name it after the layer we're going to apply it to, which in this model, if you look in the right window, is the mammal layer. And you say apply. And what we want to do in this particular model is we want only one of these two nodes to be active. So what we might do is set inhibition to KWTA inhibit, and instead of setting K from the pattern, we just set K the number, and then we set that to 1, so only one of the nodes can be active. And basically now you've created a unique layer spec that is going to use the very strict form of inhibition, and is only going to allow one node to be active. Okay, now there are other aspects you can also change in the layer spec if you want. Okay, now we're going to look at the unit spec. The unit spec basically controls things like the activation function, things like the conductances, and a variety of other things, whether you want noise in the activations. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a child spec, or control click, or use the new child button. We say new child. Now the child type is the Libra unit spec. We say OK, and it gives us a new dialog box, and we're going to call this a mammal. Aha. This is one of the bugs you sometimes get in Libra, where it's basically not responding to a keystroke. So let's see if we can. Okay, now, there we go. Now, this happens sometimes. So we're now calling it a mammal unit spec. Say apply, and we now have this mammal unit spec we can use, and we can set unique characteristics on it, such as the activation function, the VM range, VM init, what's the baseline activation, G bar, the conductances, things like that. Okay, now we're not going to do a bias spec. You could do a projection spec if you would like to have different patterns of connectivity or wiring. We're not going to do that. And then now we're going to look at Libra connection spec. Again, we're going to create a child, either new child in this button over here, or control click or right click, say new child, child type connection, Libra connection spec, OK. And now we're going to say, OK, this is going to be, and now it's doing it again. OK. Let's see if it can, there we go. So, mammal con spec. Okay, apply. Okay, and now you'll notice we have another item here. Now, we have a hidden layer spec mammal, we have a mammal unit spec, and we have a mammal connection spec. And actually what I probably should do is actually name it mammal layer spec. There we go. So now we're going to be able to see what's what. Okay, now suppose I want to apply these specs. Basically what I need to do is I go click on mammal and I get this box. And you'll notice that if I click on the box, if I look at the box for mammal for the Libra layer, you'll notice it says a unit spec here, and it says type, and over here it says what's the particular spec. And if I scroll further down in the layer spec, it just says spec, but this is actually a layer spec. So basically, if I want to change the layer spec and the unit spec for that layer, this is what I do. So I go up to unit spec, it says type Libra unit spec, and basically I click on spec, and now in this box I have mammal unit spec, which I can apply. So that layer now has a unique unit spec that I can change characteristics, and it won't apply to any of the other layers. Okay, and then I can go down to the layer spec, down where it says spec, and right now it's a hidden layer, but I want to change it so it's a mammal layer spec, which it's with its own special inhibition or competition. Okay, and now I want to do something where connection spec, and basically what I want to do is I want to change the connection specs that go from the hidden layer to mammal, and the way I can do that is I can click on the two projections. Okay. Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit. Okay, and now I get this box. It says from connection, from hidden rather, and basically now you go down and it says con spec type, it says Libra connection spec, but we want to replace this so it's a mammal connection spec. Click on that, get the dialog box, and we have mammal connection spec. Okay, and now we want to do the connection spec going the other way. We click on that, and now we get the dialog box again. We scroll down to connection spec, and we choose again the mammal connection spec. Okay, so now once we do that, these two connections can, if we want, have their own unique learning rate. So basically what I've done here then is I've shown you how to create a unique child layer spec, a child unit spec, and a child connection spec, and I've shown you how to apply those to the layer, to the units, and to the connections. And as I said, what this does is it allows you to create child specs with unique characteristics so that different connections and different layers and different units can actually have different characteristics.